Hello and welcome back to the Folk Podcast. This is episode 79. We're not quite 80 yet. We'll get that social security check, don't you worry. So we have a very interesting guest today, and I'm very excited on here because we were discussing it beforehand. This is an international man of mystery we have right here. We got James. James is a Chinese superstar who just so happens to live in Canada, who just so happens to create a YouTube channel called Thors Outdoors, where he talks about survival skills, being outside in the bush, fishing. He's got an axe. I'm a little scared now. And he is a Norse pagan. So James and I connected a long time ago. He's been a listener of the podcast for a while, and it's just about time we got him on here. So James, go ahead and just say hello to everybody.
Right on. Hey, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's great to be here finally after listening to so many episodes. So glad to be here.
So I'm actually going to have, I haven't even said this yet. I'm going to try to put a little square like in the video of like your video on Thors Outdoors. So that way it can kind of play in the background. That way people can kind of get an idea of what your channel is like.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I just started up just sharing adventures in the outdoors, camping, bushcraft, that kind of stuff, combined with, I think, some pagan philosophies. So thank you so much for giving a shout out to the page already. And I'm going to be uploading weekly. And it's quite a well-developed niche on YouTube. There's quite a few creators out there that have millions of followers. So you'd be surprised. I think most people watch it just for kind of escapism, if anything. Right. I think most people are not actually going in there and camping and spending multiple days in the wilderness. But like most of the people that watch it, it's just for pure escapism reasons. And I think, hey, that's cool too. I wish more people would actually practice it because I think there's so many benefits to it spiritually, physically, mentally. But even for escapism, hey, that's great too.
Well, when I first saw it, I compared it to Alone. Alone's one of my favorite shows. And like you said, I mean, I think I picked it up during COVID because I was like, it just gives me that escape of, oh, I can be in the woods right now. And just like the people on that show discuss, they're just like, it's so nice not thinking about, emails or notifications. You're just out there in the shit. And I think people do get that when they watch a video of someone being outside, they get that same kind of mindset.
Absolutely, man. I think, escapism from your everyday domesticated life is one part of it. And it's just so freaking beautiful. It's indescribably beautiful. I think that's what many people don't realize. You're out there in these landscapes that it's more beautiful than anything that you've ever seen in the built environment, any painting, any movie, anything like that. And you're out there doing it for free. And it just so happens to be also incredibly stimulating on so many other levels. So it's a really powerful experience. I think a lot of language to describe it really is religious in nature. It really does bring in these concepts of awe just constantly as you're out there in these kind of environments. And what you're really doing is living as an ancestral human would, right? Like humans, Homo sapiens as a species, we spend 99% of our existence on this planet living in that way. So to get out there and live like a real wild human being, I think it's incredibly important because this whole thing of living in concrete boxes and spending all of our day, in front of computer screens, we've really only been doing this for in most parts of the world, maybe 50 years. So what are the spiritual, mental, and physical implications of living a hyper-domesticated lifestyle? We don't really know what those implications are over the long term. If anything, if you look at most metrics of human mental and physical health, it's going way, way down. It's just completely plummeting. I know that, average lifespan is pretty high globally, but if you look at average health span where we're actually healthy, it's really only a few decades, into your 30s in most countries around the world. So I think it's an incredible hedge against this complete experiment we're doing with this domesticated lifestyle to spend your weekends living out in the bush, going out in the wilderness. I think it's a very, very smart thing to do with your time, really. Not only is it an incredible amount of fun, but just for maintaining your spiritual, mental, and physical health, it's a very, very, I think, smart way to invest your time, invest your weekends.
Yeah, I know, like for me personally, like that's something that I've moved back up into Minnesota and out of New Mexico where I was at, where it's very just flat plains and cattle ranches. I wanted to start doing a lot of that. And like we said, there's like a decently sized, a relatively decently sized niche of people that are interested in bushcrafting. So like for me personally, I really started getting into the whole idea of doing that when I came across TA Outdoors, Mike from over in the UK. He's one of the bigger channels I'd probably venture off to say. And just watching his stuff, because I know he does a lot of like historically accurate buildings of like Anglo-Saxon houses, Celtic roundhouses, things like that. So like I think is what initially drew me to his channel. And he doesn't have like any like really like out there spiritual experience with it, but it, you know, like outwardly, but it's all the skills and stuff that he brings that to the table and like shows you and how like this is how things would have most likely been done with as few you know, modern day tools that he uses as possible, you know. So yeah, it's definitely something that I want to definitely get more into once I get my own like area of land. I want to do something that's more heavily wooded and kind of out and away, just so I can actually take those videos and skills that I've watched, you know, on YouTube and stuff like that, and actually put them into practice and start doing it myself. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I feel like you get a lot more connected to just the world around you.
Absolutely, Ian. And you know, the thing is, like, you don't even need your own private land to do this. I mean, there's so much public land in the United States. Unfortunately, I guess in the East, there's not as much, right? But there's so much public land. The land that I usually go out on is Crown land, which is the same concept in Canada. It's public land. So there's so many opportunities to do this. And like you said, especially, you know, for most pagans, I feel that pagans in general are generally more connected to nature. And going for a hike or spending, you know, half a day out in nature, that's one thing. But when you're actually sleeping outside and you're building a fire and you're cooking your food, or maybe even, you know, gathering some, even if it's berries or chaga or some mushrooms around you, the level of connection that gives you to your local landscape is crazy compared to just hiking or spending a half day out there. So for all the pagans out there who have never done this before, it's a completely different experience when you're sleeping outside and you're waking up in the morning. It connects you so deeply, and the things that you hear and that you see, it really is incredible. So if you haven't tried it before, I really suggest all those pagans out there, you get out there for an overnighter.
And if they can't do that, they need to watch your channel, right?
Right.
Or you watch Thors Outdoors. Or you watch Thors Outdoors. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a novice, right? I'm just sharing what I have picked up along the way so far. And Jacob, I saw that you, after watching that first video that I did, that you were using birch bark on one of your, was it for, I think it was a spring, like,
spring gathering, Ostara, either one, whatever you want to call it.
Ostara, okay, yep.
Yeah, because we were trying to get the fire started after, basically it was only just embers and coals in the morning. And it was actually really cold that morning. And I saw that birch tree and it was fallen. And I was like, I got James in the mind right now. And sure enough, like, you actually, in the full video, and I think I sent it to you too, like, I put it in the fire, like it was just embers. And all I had to do was blow on it. And all of a sudden there's straight flames right away.
Absolutely, man. There's so many little amazing things like that in the outdoors that all of our ancestors knew as very, you know, common knowledge, but to us, we have to relearn these things. It's very, very interesting. But there are so many, you know, tips and tricks and little hacks like that to know in the outdoors. It's an everlasting, I think, learning curve on this stuff. But yeah, it's just it's great. I love it.
We did try the fairly unsuccessful, like, polar plunge that you've been doing as well.
Yeah.
The reason I say it's fairly unsuccessful, we didn't actually expect the ice to be so thick still, because it was starting to melt. But I took 3 steps in and I was like, oh, I hit a branch, but my feet were already numb and I couldn't tell, but it was just the ice. Like, it was still like 2 inches thick. And we eventually found a hole that was kind of naturally there, and we all kind of crawled our way, and we managed to get our butts in, but that was basically it. And I was like, good enough. Let's get out of here.
Right.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Them on us. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, people don't realize how hard ice is to break if it's above a certain thickness. Like, it is serious. You can't just, you know, use your knees or your hands to break it. So that's hilarious. I did the polar plunge stuff. I think it's really become kind of common knowledge on the internet now, especially with the popularity of that Wim Hof guy. I don't know if you guys have heard of that fellow, but it's undeniable, the effect for your health, and also for, I think, even spirituality when you're doing that kind of cold therapy, especially in a wilderness environment. It's absolutely incredible. I had the opportunity to do a training with Wim Hof in Los Angeles about 2 years ago, and incredible human being, just pure charisma. Like, in the moment, if he had said, guys, here's a gun, we're invading Poland, I would have said, hell yes, Wim, let's fucking go. Because he's just one of those people that are just, you know what I mean? There's like absolute pure charisma. But anyways, the cold exposure thing is, again, you almost need kind of like religious terminology to explain it, because when you dunk yourself in freezing cold water like that, even if it's for 30 seconds, you get such a massive endorphin rush from that. You experience a feeling of awe. And if you are in nature, surrounded by beautiful scenery, maybe with people, friends or family that you love, again, it's going to be hyper connecting you to nature. And these are just experiences you cannot get in the built environment. You can't get in the downtown of a city. And, you know, getting people connected to nature, I think, is so critical for so many reasons. One of which is, you know, humans generally only protect what we love. And we need, you know, so many people are just completely disconnected from nature now. But this is a really easy kind of gateway drug to get people reconnected to nature. Because unfortunately, what's competing for attention with nature are things like TikTok and Netflix. You know what I mean? So
they're doing pretty damn good at competing too.
They're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And you know, the problem with just going for a hike, for example, is that that's very just visually based, right? You're like, oh my God, this looks beautiful. It's generally, you know, people just see a wall of green if it's the summertime. But how do you compete with Netflix, which you can just turn on in your home and you get all the same kind of, you know, intense visual stimulation, you know? So these are one of the things that you can do in nature that's relatively simple, but can truly give you a religious experience that you cannot find in the built environment.
Yeah, definitely. I would say like my most recent like being out in nature for a good, you know, more than a day was around this time last year. I was coming from Kentucky. We had a spring gathering around this time of the year, and my GPS had taken me through the Ozarks. And luckily, like in that area, you can do what's called, what's the actual term for it? Basically, it's just like off the trail camping. Like you can just park your car, and then as long as it's not directly within so many feet of a trail, head, or a main road, you can basically park it and then go camp somewhere. And I ended up finding a lake that was in the park, and that's where I ended up parking my vehicle near where they had boat access, so it was out of the way and it wasn't, you know, even near any of the trails. And then I took my stuff and went, you know, and found a good spot near that lake. And yeah, waking up next to that, you know, that morning there was a nice low fog hanging over it and everything like that. And it was just an experience, you know. And then that morning it was pretty chilly. It was probably about like low 40s. And yeah, just walking around with that crisp morning air was definitely something that I'll never forget, you know. And it was just a good time in general.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Now, did you, after you got home from that experience, did you appreciate the things in your home more? Because that's one thing that I definitely find is like, if you're freezing your nuts off in a sleeping bag, and you're not actually freezing your nuts off, right? Because you wouldn't go out there with that kind of bad equipment or whatever. But
no.
When you get back to your home and it's climate controlled and you've got a shower and you can pick something out of the fridge and, you know, put it in a microwave or an oven, you're like, oh my God, this technology is incredible. Things that you just take for granted as your everyday life. But when you get back to it from camping, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, definitely.
This is like living in friggin'
Oh,
Asgard.
we live better than the kings did, you know, 400 years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, when you just get it every single day, almost essentially for free, you stop being grateful for it, you know? So this is another example of why getting out into wilderness, it totally resets all your expectations when it comes to those kind of things, which is nice because it makes your everyday life seem more magical, right? Which is I think another benefit of that.
Well, and I think that's something we've noticed with the gatherings in general, outside of them being, you know, religious things, you know, and actually sitting down and calling to these gods. You know, just getting people away from their everyday life for 4 days is a huge deal for a lot of people. And I think, you know, that speaks for a lot of the experience people have, because they're like, you know, wow, I haven't touched my phone all weekend, or I've just been outside around the fire drinking coffee and talking to people. And it's like, because that's more what humans are supposed to do, you know?
For sure, man. I think that the gatherings mimic that so well. And I mean, that's what humans have been doing for such a long period of time. So it's incredible. I can't wait to experience it myself. Hopefully we're going to be doing them in Canada soon.
Yeah. I mean, they should be more of a possibility now. Or are you trying to do them yourself?
No.
Okay. Okay. So we got to do the work. We got to do the work. All right.
You guys got to do the work. You guys got to do the work. But I mean, also the border's been shut down. I haven't even been able to come, you know, to things going on in Ohio, or even Kentucky's really not that far from Ohio. You know, sorry, from Ontario rather. But the border's been shut down for almost all of COVID, unfortunately, right? But
yeah.
yeah, the gatherings, the fact that you guys do them outside, or the majority of the proceedings occur outside, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I've honestly struggled. I don't know, Ian. Have you done a ritual where they're inside? I can't remember if you have.
The only thing that we've really done that's been inside that I've done so far is just the 2 Philia meditations.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's different. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I've
so
done a
wasn't-
couple because of the weather. We've had to do a couple of like the ancestor rituals, or even I think we had to do like an Ostara bloat at Georgia last year. It was just raining so hard we had to do it
Yeah.
inside. And it's like they're still good, but there's just something missing. You need to be under the open sky. I feel like, I feel like it just makes it's so much easier for the gods to connect with you and for you to connect with them and all that stuff.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And have you guys ever incorporated magic mushrooms into like beyond an individual basis? Like, have you ever made magic mushroom tea and then like offered it to the participants, for example?
James,
And
we're not
that
allowed
might
to
not be
talk about
legal.
these things. We're not allowed to talk about these things officially. Officially, we would never do those things. But I think we've talked
amazing.
about it on the podcast before. We
Okay.
typically keep it to private events. Now we just still do them like we've done them in group environments before, but it's typically just with like very close knit people in the community, because mushrooms in general, it's better to do them with people that you know, in case something does happen. And so we had a private gathering that was just mostly the fellowship leaders, Ian, some of the original people, and we ended up doing like a mushroom tea and just having like a ritual, wandering around the woods, and it's a great time.
Absolutely.
And I mean, something that we
Absolutely.
would love to do, it's a possibility, now that we have nonprofit status, we can actually lobby to be allowed to use psychedelics like mushrooms as a religious practice. There's actually a place here in Kentucky, it's a Christian church. I don't know how Christian they actually are, but they got legal ayahuasca trips. It's like
Wow.
30 miles from here. Yeah, and if you remember their church, they have like regulated ayahuasca trips they can do.
Wow, that's incredible. If they're allowing them to do ayahuasca, I mean, mushrooms should be fine, because ayahuasca is a much more, I think, a longer trip. Like that can be up to 24 hours, can it not?
I think ayahuasca is actually one of the ones that's like a really intense, like 15-30 minute one. I think.
Is it really?
Yeah, I think that's what. Yeah, it's kind of like DMT. Not that I would know what those things are. I went to art school. Don't judge me. How do you think we make art? You think we just look at it?
No.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But that's one of the things I loved about the honesty of your first video. Like in your freaking title is magic mushrooms, like right away. And I know Ian, you were thinking about like how he was like still doing stuff.
Yeah, it was when you were doing you were setting up your tarp and you were doing the knotworks. And I was just like, how is this man doing these intricate knotworks right now on mushrooms? I was like, that's just impressive, because one, I'm terrible at tying knots just normally. I was like, I couldn't even imagine doing that like on mushrooms right now.
That's hilarious. Well, to be honest, I only did a half a gram. Like when I go out there, I do a half a gram. So
I figured you weren't like completely traveling the realms, while you're out there.
No. You're not in the ninth dimension talking with Baldur tree for sure. I mean, to be honest, that would be
Baldur. I gotta tie this knot. Leave me alone.
That's right. That's right. Seriously. I mean, to be honest, that would be almost idiotic, because when you're going, especially by yourself in the wilderness, there's about 10,000 ways you can kill yourself, or be eaten asshole first by a pack of wolves or bear or something like that, right? So you don't want to do that much. You just want to do just enough to better connect yourself with the spirits that are around you, yeah, exactly. So a half a gram, I think is more than enough. I wouldn't do more than that, unless you're at night in your camp, already settled down. But
I don't know. At night, man, that's when shit can get real weird.
That could get that would be actually kind of terrifying. Like in the middle
you're
of the
going to be
night.
running with the wolves, eating things asshole first if you start.
Wake up the next morning. Oh no, it happened again.
I'm a wolf with you now.
That's
well,
right.
it's not like you could do that now because
possible.
you shaved your beard, so they wouldn't take you.
They wouldn't allow me in, man. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm
to our audience out there. I almost didn't let him on the show because he did it. Just to let you.
I know. Well, historically, I do beard in the winter and then clean shave it in the summer. Just in case. So you got to do what you got to do. But I do regret it.
I mean, I talk to people about this all the time, you know, because a lot of people in the military want beards, and so we get asked a lot, especially now that we're a nonprofit, you know, if they can get waivers. But like technically, we really don't know anything. You know, if a beard was seen as religious, you know, in theory, they probably would have had beards in the winter because it keeps you warm, and then they most likely probably shave them off in the summer because they keep you hot. You know, so it's probably a practical thing. But you know, I think the beard has become more of a symbol in our modern time than it was anything in the past.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, if you look at popular shows like The Last Kingdom of Vikings, I mean, there's so many hairstyles in there that you can tell those are heavily trimmed beards.
Right.
Or even, you know, it's just a goatee or just even a mustache that's left on, you know what I mean? So it would be very interesting to see culture by culture, tribe by tribe, you know, what the idea of if you were a man and you didn't have a beard, you know, would you be ostracized? It's like, you know, you lost your
You guys
lost
ready
your
to go down a
mojo or
weird rabbit
whatever.
hole?
Yeah.
So I went down this
Yeah.
rabbit hole in art school.
Nice.
Because I was in an art history class and we were studying like ancient Egyptian art, and all the statues naked are completely clean shaven. And I was like, you know what? I wonder like the popularity of pubic hair over like human history. Like, yeah, where's the ups and downs? And I actually did some research, and yeah, like the Egyptians despised body hair. Like they saw body hair as like this uncleaned, you know, that was like for the slaves had body hair. And so especially the royalty were very obsessive about being like clean shaven from the eyebrow down, basically. And then the Greeks kind of picked that up as well as the Romans. And then as soon as you start getting into like the Dark Age and the fall of civilization a little bit, that's when you started having just more body hair in general. But it seems like the more society builds, the more people are like, ew, pubes, like get rid of those.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I know like in the late Roman Empire that, you know, the mustache in earlier Germanic paganism, like we're talking Goths, Franks, Lombards, you know, these kind of folks that were around right at the end of the Roman Empire, they were all about the mustache, the giant handlebar mustache.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't about beards at all, which is very, very interesting. And I think arguably the handlebar mustache is even more badass than a beard. Like it's really fucking. I might be using the wrong term. You know what I mean? Though, like the biker mustache.
Oh yeah,
the
like
ones. I don't know if handlebar is the correct term for that, but just giant bushly mustaches. And that was a sign of barbarism. I mean, for the Romans, it's like the Romans would never have a mustache. It's either, you know, a well-kept beard or completely clean shaven at that time. But apparently the youth in Rome that were like, oh, cool, they would actually try growing out a mustache for themselves, much to the chagrin of their parents, right? Like the young teenage boys, just to show they were badass or whatever. So I thought that was kind of funny. But, you know, nobody really talks about the fact that the earlier Germanic tribes, it was very much, you know, running on the same sociocultural software as the later, you know, Danes and Swedes and all those folks. It's the handlebar mustache. It's not the beard at all, which is really interesting.
yeah.
I wonder where that switch came. You know, it's like, why did later Germanic peoples forget that essentially, you know, or go away from it?
Well, you know, I think, I mean, just like there with the youth in Rome growing mustaches as a sign of revolt and retaliation, because teenagers have not changed since the dawn of man. They're the same.
Yeah.
You know, I think humans haven't changed that much. They really haven't since, you know, we were walking around in togas and, you know, or even, you know, past that, inventing the wheel. I think at the end of the day, things come and go, styles come and go. Obviously more now just because everything moves so much faster. But I mean, there was probably, you know, during the Roman Empire, there was probably a time beards were in, then they were out. They were in, they were out. You know, all of a sudden sideburns were in, and then they were out. And it's hard to say where it all starts, honestly.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm all for bringing back handlebar mustaches. Those mustaches are so freaking cool, man. They're so
it's so
cool.
synonymous with like, you know, like a grungy biker kind of look now, I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because biker, you know, outlaw gangs, I mean, so many of them have like, you know, the barbarians, the Mongols. I think there's one called the Pagans. Isn't there a biker gang called the Pagans?
Maybe.
I think that there is.
Maybe.
I think that
I know there's some that have like, you know, Norse mythology related names, but I don't know if they're like the good kind of pagans. I'm not
sure. Well, most biker gangs are, yeah, they're criminal elements, right? Like the Hell's Angels and all those kind of folks. But it's just interesting that they've adopted many of these kind of barbarian styles. Because I mean, were Viking bands not like the ancient world's biker gangs? I mean, in a sense, I think that's an interesting analogy. You know?
Yeah, I think you can make that. Yeah, one thing I will say for our historians that watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, I get confused now. But one of the things we can say is that the Scandinavian people were very groomed because they did find so much evidence of like, combs and brushes and things like that. So they did care about their outward appearance. So clearly style, they weren't, dirty barbarians running around all the time. They were actually pretty clean and well kept for the time.
For sure. Yeah. Isn't there a lot of conjecture about like versus the Anglo-Saxons, that they were actually much cleanlier in their practices at that time, like in the 800s and 900s?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of like internet jokes too, like referring to that, like being called like dirty barbarians or like dirty Vikings, but then it's like you have the evidence of that they were relatively much cleanlier people, and hygiene was a big deal compared to a lot of the Anglo-Saxon areas and stuff like that. So there's some, I don't know like how official or like how realistic it is, but yeah, there is to some degree some evidence stating that they were pretty
well, and I think that translates to today. The Scandinavian people are like an incredibly clean people. Much like much like the Japanese, like they're just weird. I don't know what makes them different about it, or why being up there made them like, no, we have to keep this clean.
Yeah.
That's true. I wonder what that connection is. I mean, they're definitely some of the wealthiest countries in the world, like in terms of GDP per capita, right? I wonder if it's a wealth thing, or is it a northern thing, or is it something else in that socio-cultural software that
maybe
makes
freezing your
so
nuts
clean
off every winter just makes you like cleaner. I don't know.
It very well could. It very well could. But yeah, for the past 2 years, I've been working on this TV show, and it's basically set in very late Rome with those same kind of groups that I just mentioned, like the Goths and the Franks, the Alemanni, all these kind of folks. And it's now morphed into a book, because what I've found in this process is that to get a show made of this nature, you can't just write a pilot script, because usually what happens in TV world is if you write a great pilot script, so like the first episode, and you pitch that around and you get someone who believes in it, then you'll get the funding, and you'll write out the rest of the first season and move into production and all that kind of stuff. But the nature of the industry now, and the nature of this particular kind of show, right? If you're doing a sword and sandals epic like Vikings or The Last Kingdom or Game of Thrones or The Wheel of Time, these kind of shows, right? What you really need to do is you need to write a book. And because a book basically has the blueprint for an entire season at a time. And also you need to get, not just write a book, but you need to get the book successfully published for it to be considered, because these kind of shows are so complicated and expensive to make. Content executives are not willing to bet the money unless it's basically kind of a proven commodity.
Yeah.
So that's been a very interesting learning process for me, because this kind of information is not readily available online, and it's very difficult to get in front of creative executives. It's taken me a very long time to even talk briefly with some of them, and the immediate feedback you hear is the only way this kind of thing will work is if you write the book and then the book gets published. So that's what I'm doing now. Is I've recently changed gears into actually starting to write the book versus the screenplay, because unfortunately that's the only way something like this will work. But I heard the review that you guys did on Vikings, and I don't know if you're going to do one on The Last Kingdom coming up, but it's so great that these kind of shows exist out there, I think, for the faith. And I mean, arguably those two shows have done more for Germanic paganism than anything in the past 50 years combined, I would say.
I would definitely say, as far as like awareness, I mean, shoot, if I could pull up my analytics from, my YouTube, literally, everything was going steady until Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the video game, came out. And all of a sudden it was like, pew, just like through the roof. And that's where the Wisdom of Odin really took off. Just because people were playing the game and they were like, Vikings, Viking religion, literally Google search Viking religion, see what pops up. And that kind of leads them down the rabbit hole. And we see this every single time, a new show comes out, or a new game, or even like, just like a new book or something like that. It just raises more awareness. Like our last guest we just had on here, her episode comes out today as we're recording this, Joanna Wittenberg. She wrote a book on Viking age warrior queens, and it's like a historical fiction. And it's about Åsa, which is actually historically written as a like queen. She was the mother of Halfdan the Black, so a very famous Viking. But all it says is that she was a warrior queen, and that was basically it. So she kind of filled in the blanks. So I think all these things are just bringing more awareness. Like there's definitely that hate around it. Like people definitely can hate on the shows pretty hard. But yeah, like you said, I think I'm with you in it. I think they've done a lot of good at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Even just to see visually, give people an idea of, how these things functioned. Some of the, the religious parts of the culture. It's just been absolutely fascinating. For you guys personally in your lives, what has been the impact of those shows, if anything?
Oh, you're cross interviewing us now. All right.
I'm curious.
This is my show, James. You don't ask me questions. Don't listen to him, Ian. Don't give in.
Well, no, he's got me thinking now.
Yeah.
No,
I could tell you mine, because for me,
you
the reason that I became a pagan in the first place is because of these shows. I guess, when Vikings was coming out, it being the first time that I was experimenting with magic mushrooms, and I was kind of questioning, like, I felt like there was a lot of, what is the word, nihilism in my life, lacking spiritual direction. I love the outdoors, and seeing Vikings, particularly that episode in Uppsala where they're, doing the human sacrifices and magic mushrooms and everything, it made me realize, like, oh my God, that's the spiritual connection for me. It's the pagan connection with nature, the worship of nature, the worship of trees and bears and eagles and ravens. That's the spirituality for me. That's the religion for me. It really opened my eyes, because I don't know, because Christianity just didn't really speak to me. So if I hadn't seen that television show, I don't know if I would have ever, put the two and two together, to be honest. So it had a huge impact on my life. And it's clear that it's been put in front of the faith, in front of millions and millions of eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
There. So,
well, especially considering paganism was so hated on for, even up to like the 2000s, metal bands, Elvis Presley was seen as like a devil worshiper because of the way he danced, so we've come a long way since the 50s when, anything that we would do now, even having this conversation in any kind of public way, would have been very discriminated against.
Sure.
So yeah, I would agree that, media for sure. And to answer your question, I think the biggest impact for me was music. Because I think that's what got me in the Viking show initially. Because I can remember when hearing like Einar Selvik being in the show, because I think he started in season 2 or season 3. There's a scene where he's like on the edge of a dock, singing and banging a drum, and really starting to hear all the music come together. That's really started. I feel like what woke everything up in me was just the ambient noise, the sound of a ship going over water. Maybe it was an ancestral thing that brought me back. Like, oh, these are the sound, the noises of a long lost people. So yeah, I would say that's kind of what's stuck with me is the ambience from it all.
For me, it more like, for me, it was more of it solidified what I was already starting to dip my toes in. Because I'm trying to think what year exactly did the Vikings first season?
2013. 2013.
Okay, yeah. So I was just starting to dip my toes into the Norse pagan aspect of it, because I was originally dabbling with Celtic paganism for about a year, and then I transferred, basically started going into Norse paganism from there. And yeah, so about that time frame, actually, yeah, it would have been when the first season of Vikings came out. And for me, I was just kind of solidifying, this feels right, kind of like what Jacob was saying, combination of like the music, and this felt just right for me. And then I got hooked onto it and everything like that. And then I've rewatched it time and time again, and I pick out little bits and pieces that I didn't notice before. I have a greater appreciation for now that I'm a lot deeper into the practice and stuff like that. So for me, it was just solidifying something that I was already feeling called to, and it just kind of like sealed the deal from there. And I haven't really looked back since.
Right on. Interesting. So it did have a really big impact then.
Yeah, I would say so.
Wow, that's fantastic. And that's really interesting about the Celtic paganism thing as well. I feel like Celtic paganism plays such a second fiddle to Germanic paganism in popular culture now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just feel like there's no major TV shows about it, really. There's just not as much information out there. There are no real tomes like the Prose Edda or Poetic Edda, right?
Yeah, there's no central knowledge. There's a lot of stories. I think it's just harder to go. It's honestly really hard to dissect, because it's really hard to determine what's a god, what's a hero, what's just a folk tale. And then it gets so merged with Anglo-Saxon myth, and then Viking, and then on top of that, this Christianization. So I think it's just really messy to dig through.
I would say the biggest thing that anybody would have a solid knowledge on is, I know there is like a druid college. I believe it is in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, where they are kind of like, they have taken up that mantle of kind of keeping that way of life and like that practice preserved. Now, how, you know, influence it has been over the, you know, the centuries, I don't know. I've never been to any of their seminars or whatever they actually hold on to out there, but you know, I would say they're probably that main group that is kind of keeping that part of life. But yeah, as far as like media aspects and stuff like that, there really isn't anything TV show wise. I mean, kind of like what Jacob was saying, a lot of it is muddled together. I was watching the movie King Arthur that covers the more historically accurate part covering Arturius, you know, for being a Roman but also being from Britain during that time period. And like, to me, you know, that's more of like a Celtic aspect more than, you know, Norse or Germanic people. But
so the book I just pulled down, this is the best book I have ever found on Celtic myth. It's Celtic Myth and Magic by Eden McCoy. So it's really thick, surprisingly, and it's got just a list of like all the deities and the holidays and how to like perform rituals and stuff. But it's also the reminder of why I think Celtic paganism has kind of dropped to the wayside, and it's because Wicca is heavily based off of Celtic myth, I believe, because Wicca came from England, and I think a lot of things that became Wicca were Celtic. A lot of like, you know, Samhain and like a lot of the holidays, like Beltane, I think a lot of things come from the Celtic side. Again, I might get crucified by the witches here for saying those things, but yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of the stuff that that Wicca came from Celtic myth.
Interesting. My neighbor just got engaged to a Wiccan individual lady, so they're having a Wiccan wedding, which I am invited to, which I'm very excited about.
Nice.
But yeah, that's really interesting. I guess, you know, Wicca and witchcraft, and you really see it on Instagram and TikTok. There are very big communities out there, it seems, for those kind of things. It seems incredibly female dominated though, right? Like it's almost like a non-masculine, like men are almost not welcome or not encouraged to participate or something like that. Is that correct?
I can't speak for, maybe Ian, you might know more than I feel like you know more about Wicca than I do, but I think my understanding, there's twofold things here. One, Harry Potter. Wicca skyrocketed in popularity, Wicca Witch Rap, because of Harry Potter. They don't want to admit it, but it's fucking true. But two, I think the reason that it's very female oriented is maybe it's female forward, because the market for witchcraft channels and Wicca channels are of a, you know, here's the setup. You get light visuals, you get a pretty woman, and she does witch stuff. Those videos do great. Like there are so many, no harm against those. You know, I've talked to, you know, Scarlet Ravenswood. I've talked to the Green Witch. They're wonderful people, but there's a lot of them out there that create content like that. And I think it's just become a very popular, like you said, like escapism. Like a lot of people watch those videos to, you know, to just escape into something, and they've just become very popular.
Yeah, I would say, I think like a lot of people still associate just the term witch with strictly female. You know, I think that is a big issue with, or like not necessarily an issue, but I think that's where is more of a heavy feminine collective, where I think a lot of people still just coin the term witch with being a woman that practices witchcraft. And I think that is why primarily a lot of the Wiccan practitioners are focused around, you know, a more female audience.
Well, and I think a lot of our women in the community, which again, I feel so lucky that we have not ended up with a sausage fest, which is a lot of the times what happens in heathenry, is it's like 95% men. I would say our gatherings are almost 60-40, if not 50-50 most of the time, which is great.
Yeah.
And a lot of the women in the community come from a Wicca or a witchcraft background. And a lot of, you know, because the distinction between witchcraft and Wicca is a lot of the women in the community still practice some form of witchcraft while being Norse Pagan, or at least have come from Wicca.
Right on. I still think, I feel like they're almost our cousins though too, because like the last two girls that I dated were both kind of witchy, I would say. Like I could never date a girl anymore that's complete, you know, militant atheist, nihilist, you know, hates all religion, all that kind of stuff. She needs to be at least a little bit, if not like, you know, a Germanic pagan.
Interested in the spiritual. Yeah.
Exactly.
Have a fond connection to Lord of the Rings, you know. Do you feel something when you watch Lord of the Rings? Okay, you're good.
Exactly. But I mean, there's a definite overlap there. And even if they're not practicing the same things that you are, at least there's an understanding there, right? At least they're essentially a pagan of sorts. And they're going to be cool with your lifestyle, and you'll have shared values and all that kind of stuff. You won't have to explain, you know, everything, all that kind of jazz. But that's another thing with like the Celtic paganism stuff, is even if you have that heritage, it's just so hard to find that community out there. Like with Germanic paganism, there's such an enormous online community and local communities out there, much thanks to guys like you two that are building it. It's so easy to get into it because you feel like there's an actual community out there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons we went with Northern traditions as our tagline. Like I would say we're still predominantly Norse pagan, but like Kevin in our community follows the Celtic deities, but also the Norse at the same time. And I think, was it Survive the Jive actually even said that, he sees the, Anglo-Saxon and Norse and, Celtic all kind of in the same sphere. Or was that him or was that Joanna? I can't remember.
I believe it might have been, I think it might have been.
It was either one of them. But I agree. I mean, because I have that book, Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe, and there's so many commonalities between Germanic, Scandinavian, Celtic, and even Slavic. I mean, Anglo-Saxon, they're all so similar. We're just changing names at this point.
Yeah, I think it was Survive the Jive, because it was when I brought up the knot work video that he did, where all of them kind of just branch off of each other, or they all have these similarities, but at the same time, like, they are essentially the same. It's just each region has their own style to the same thing, basically.
Yeah, for sure. One really interesting snapshot into the Celtic world is Julius Caesar's The Gallic Campaign. For any like pagan out there who has not read that book, it's fucking fascinating to get a step-by-step, walkthrough of the Celtic Holocaust, or the Celtic, the conquering of the Celtic peoples from Julius Caesar, but also all of his insights to the socio-cultural practices that they do. It's absolutely fascinating, that book. It's mind-boggling. I think I've probably read it 7 or 8 times, literally. Like it's so.
Yeah,
so,
I mean that's how I feel about Germania too. Germania, like the first time I read it, it was like a whole new world opened up.
Oh yeah. Have you actually gleaned anything, Jacob? Because I found in the research for my television series now book that that gave so many fascinating like scene ideas in that book. I'm wondering if either of you guys have because he goes through and gives little examples of all the different tribes, the kind of things that they would do, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this one example of some scene where in a certain sacred grove, like people had to fall on their knees and roll into it, or like roll out of it for some reason. Like, oh, like that's really interesting. Yeah. Like the entrance and exit of the sacred grove, you don't just walk into it, right? It's like, how would you know that if it wasn't for that example from Tacitus?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting book. And I guess the Gallic Campaign, he does talk about some Germanic stuff, because Julius Caesar did have some interaction with some of the Germanic tribes at that time, but not to the same, depth of what Tacitus was doing. That's such a cool book. That's such a cool book.
The only thing I can say that's similar to that is in Saxo Grammaticus's The History of the Danes, Volume 2, which I don't know. It's really hard to get a copy of. Have you ever read into those at all? It covers more Slavic.
No.
Oh, good. Well, this is good because I'm releasing a video here soon. So this is one of those weird books that's gotten lost in time. So you can actually get Saxo Grammaticus's The History of the Danes, Volume 1, which is the first like 7 books. You can get that online right now. But for some reason, Volume 2 is almost lost to the universe. You can only get a copy that was printed in like the 50s, and they're like hundreds of dollars. It hasn't been in print in decades. And luckily, someone in our community found a PDF, and so I have the PDF version of it. And it's honestly very dry. It's, hundreds of pages. It's got the Latin translation, the English. But then there's this random section of like 14 pages that perfectly describe a ceremony and rites and a temple to the god Svetovid. In Slavic paganism, and it goes through what offerings they gave, how they gave to him, how they determined whether or not his signs were realized, all the way up to the point where the Romans came in and tore it down.
No way. That is so cool.
It's fucking long though. So yeah, I'm just gonna do a video where I read it. I'm just gonna be like, look, this is knowledge that's been lost, and it's been kind of slightly gatekeeped a little bit because people can't get it. So I'm just gonna read it. And so if I get assassinated after that, it's like the mysterious like order right here. This is my message. I'm a happy individual. If I mysteriously end up depressed and killing myself, it was not real. It's because I made this video.
There's an inside job.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But it's not the first time I've come up on that kind of stuff. There's so many books that you just can't get anymore.
Is it because it's not financially viable to release it because there's not the audience, do you think? Or is it because the manuscript's incomplete, so it's difficult to publish it?
I think You know, the only good answer I would say is probably the first one is, you know, maybe people just don't see it as financially viable. But with things like Saxo Grammaticus is the History of the Danes Volume 2, why have they published Volume 1 but not Volume 2?
Mm-hmm,
You know?
and why not put it in one tome?
Right. Or like the book I just got, the Gragas Laws. I just purchased a book about medieval Icelandic law. Like, if there's a market for medieval Icelandic law, there's a market for Volume 2.
True.
Yeah, but yeah, with risk of, you know, putting myself on some kind of list, you know, I do think that there is a little bit of a snobbery to the scholarly world. Not all scholars, obviously, but I do think there's this idea of some knowledge isn't worthy of us. You know, the normal people. Like, this is just like the Oxford edition. Like, we have one copy in the Oxford library that's ours, and you have to be like X rank whatever to get it. And I do think that exists out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I mean, like I think I may have mentioned it on the podcast a long time ago.
No, you're still alive, so it's okay.
Yeah, I'm still alive. And it's a particular set of books, well, a book and notes and stuff from Sir Isaac Newton and his dabbling with alchemy. And there are 7 pages from his personal notes and things like that that are not published in the main book that I currently have. And from what I remember is 4 out of those 7 are in private collectors like possessions, and then the other 3 are in the Cambridge Library, and the only way you can access that is if you go to Cambridge, and like very particular like group. So it's like like, come on guys, like if I could get one thing, it would be all 7 of those pages so I can finish you know, reading that stuff. But yeah, I think to some degree, yeah, kind of like what you were saying, Jacob, is like that snobbery or like that
elitism
knowledge. Yeah, like this knowledge is not meant, for the common folk, or you know.
I mean, look, I mean, a lot of things in our modern world comes from Christianity, and I mean, how long did they control the only translations of the Bible? You know.
Yeah,
for sure. Have you guys seen The Last Kingdom?
Not the newest season.
I'm caught up to the newest season, but I haven't started that yet.
God, you guys got to check it out. It's pretty fucking cool. Yeah, because I felt the last few seasons of The Last Kingdom have kind of, you know, gone downhill. They really got away from the books, but the final season is pretty darn well done. I shed a tear or two, maybe not. And it's really well done. And now I think there's a 2-hour film, which is going to be the finale coming out in the next few months. But that's another great, you know, show that I don't think gets talked about enough. One reason being, it's got a bad title in that it doesn't say what it is, right? Vikings, what it's about, everybody knows. But when you see The Last Kingdom on Netflix, people are like, The Last Kingdom of what, right? They don't realize that it's total Viking era stuff.
Well, that's not even what the books are called, right? The books are called something different, aren't they?
Oh God, you know what, man? I think I've actually read that book series like 9 times, start to finish, and I think it actually is. I think it might have been called like the Warlord Chronicle at first, but now it's being renamed to The Last Kingdom.
I'm going to the internet. Cover for me, boys. I'm gonna find this out.
Check it out. I mean, it's unfortunate because they could have called it at least something like, you know, the end of Anglo-Saxon, or like, you know, the beginning of, I don't know. You know what I mean? At least something that hinted at what it was. But that's another great series. I think that overall that series is better than Vikings, to be honest. One of the reasons being that there's a lot more comedy in it. Like it's not a comedy, but there's a lot more comedic relief, similar to what is in Game of Thrones with like Tyrion Lannister. Yeah, there's a lot there. I believe there's 13. I believe there's 13 of them. But for any pagan out there who hasn't read the book series, oh my God, it is phenomenal. And there's so much. His historical research, Bernard Cornwell, is amazing. So if you really want to get a snapshot of what pagan Anglo-Saxon England was like, wow.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate, you know, about The Last Kingdom compared to like just Vikings. I feel like it hit a more realistic standpoint, where Vikings obviously kind of did branch off and take advantage of like the Viking aesthetic, and like Vikings are, you know, nothing but warriors, stuff like that. Like, yes, they did have like the farming aspect and like, you know, what they really did, but I feel like The Last Kingdom historically hit things a lot better compared to Vikings overall. And I definitely appreciated that. I feel like it wasn't quite so overly done.
Okay, here's your answer, boys. It's called this. I've done the research. So it's actually the Saxon stories. is what it was called.
Ah,
And the first book was called The Last Kingdom, and that's why the show is called The Last Kingdom.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I much one of the books is called The Pagan Lord, or that would have been cool. I feel like if they would have called it The Pagan Lord, like full send, you know, I'm in.
That's right. I think I've got one of the books on my table here, but yeah, it's a phenomenal series. If you guys haven't read it, oh my goodness.
To show off your Adam's apple right now? I know it's defined. Get it out of here.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
For fuck's sake, people are gonna look at my channel and they're like, "Oh, let me check this dude's Instagram." But God, he never wears a fucking shirt. Like,
hey, now I've got a medical condition that requires me to do that. So,
oh yeah, you have to get like a certain amount of sun every day, like 70% sun exposure.
Exactly. Oh man, I can't find it. Anyways, I got all the books lying around here somewhere. But yeah, it's a phenomenal series. Actually, George R.R. Martin wrote that. Bernard Cornwell writes better battle scenes than any other author that he has read. So that's high praise coming from the R.R. Martin himself.
Yeah.
That guy's pretty awesome.
I think the problem with The Last Kingdom, honestly, every time I talk to someone about it, they're like, I couldn't get past the first season. And I do think the first season drags quite a bit. And I personally, for me, I thought Uhtred was just a shitbag of a character. And like, I just didn't find him interesting. I'm like, if this is my main character, I'm not really in. But I think in season 2 is when it picks up, and you know, and you start seeing Uhtred mature, because that's one of the best things about the show to me, and watching it, is seeing his character transform from this kind of like, you know, annoying teenage boy all the way up to a man who's gone through great loss, and he shows that really well.
For sure. Yeah. That's an interesting point, because I watched the first season already having being a huge fan of the series. So I was like, of course I'm going to watch the whole first season. But that's interesting to hear you say that, man. Ian, did you find that? Have you seen the whole series?
I've seen everything up to the final season. I just have to watch that. But yeah, it took me probably two attempts to get through the first season. Cause yeah, I had a very similar kind of mindset, because I think I had just gotten done watching whatever current season of Vikings had come out around the time that the first season of The Last Kingdom had come out, or that I had discovered. I think maybe season 2 might have been out by that point that I had started. And yeah, I think because I had watched Vikings and it was so different, and you know, at that point in Vikings it was much more quicker pace. It was a struggle for me to get through season 1. So it took me 2 attempts to get through to actually start to watch. But yeah, like once I got through it, I was hooked, and yeah, it definitely picked up a lot better. And not having read the books, I think that is probably why. I think anybody who has read the books has a greater appreciation for the show starting out than say somebody like myself or like Jacob, who you haven't read the books, right?
No, I haven't read the books.
So I think those who haven't read the books and appreciated the story for what it is, I think might have a slightly harder time getting into the first season. But yeah, once you get past that, it's a phenomenal show, and I've loved it. I'm excited to start the last season of it, but yeah, I wanted to kind of come down from just watching Vikings Valhalla and then go into it.
Yeah. And I mean, the books are so much better than the show. Are you guys worried at all that now that The Last Kingdom's coming offline, and I guess Vikings Valhalla is designed for, I guess, a 3-season arc? Were you worried that are you worried that the growth of the faith will see some slowing now that maybe we're over the hump of, like, you know, huge amount of media? I guess there'll always be the Thor movies from Marvel, but
yeah, but those are going to slow down, or personally, based on my finger on the pulse, I think you could argue right now might be the peak, because we have so much Viking content coming out this year, because we still have the Northman movie coming out, which I'm so pumped for. I'm so excited for that. And then you still have God of War coming out this year. And then you have Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice 2. So, I mean, that's a lot of Viking media for 1 year. And I think one of the things with content and media, and when things get picked up, is it's going to reach a peak. Everyone's going to get saturated with it, and they're going to drop it. So I do think we will have to accept the time that Vikings will slow down a lot. I think it's going to start declining after this, but I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think the fan base it's created of just people that like Vikings now is so strong that I don't think it's actually going to disappear. It's just going to slow down.
For sure. And I think that also for the content platforms out there, they're like, holy shit, there's a huge appetite for this. and we got to keep it satiated. I mean, that's one of the strategies I'm taking with the story that I'm trying to tell, because you know, there's a huge audience out there for this stuff. So once these shows go away, I mean, there's so many stories from that era that can be told, and it's such a long. If you go back to the earlier Germanic tribes of even, you know, the time of Julius Caesar's conquest of the Celts, you're essentially dealing with like 1,000 years of history, right? Because Julius Caesar's like 55 BC. If you take that all the way up to the Viking era, call it, you know, like 1,000 AD, that's 1,000 years of like Germanic pagan cultures.
Well, and then you have
so many stories.
I think the early, I was going to say Barbarian season. Have you seen Barbarians, James?
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely. I mean, I thought it sucked.
What?
A fat donkey penis. Fat donkey penis. To be completely honest.
Really?
Oh yeah, I just thought it was. Oh, dude, it was so bad because you can tell it's just the way it was shot. You could tell the budget was so tiny. This is just 12 dudes running around the forest. You know, it's like
shut up, man, writing his screenplay in a coffee shop on Tuesdays.
No, but I mean, like, they don't show the scale of the show is just wasn't there for me. You know what I mean? Like showing a Roman column going deep into enemy territory with 6 guys in it, with like a Roman general at the head of a column of 6 horses is like, are you fucking kidding me? So I understood, you know, they probably had a very tiny budget in what they were doing, but it was just, I don't know. It felt very underwhelming, you know, to me, but, hey, it's another show out there, right? So I guess it's a good thing at the end of the day. But you guys liked it. You guys enjoyed it.
I think I enjoyed the German aspect, the fact that it was in German and Latin and stuff like that. I think that it shows that there was a lot of care for it.
Yeah. I enjoyed the pagan aspect of it because I feel like they showed a different side of things that isn't necessarily shown, because like normally we get like Vikings and stuff like that where it's more of the you know, Scandinavian aspect of it compared to the actual like old Germanic ways of doing things, and you know, referring to Odin as Woden and things like that. So I appreciated a different lens on the entire practice.
Yep.
Now I will say one thing that actually it came up to me earlier. Have you seen how big into Heilung are you, James?
Oh, I love Heilung. I was listening to them today.
Yeah, well, of course you are.
Those guys are fucking great.
Have you been to a live show yet?
No. Wait, were you at that in Colorado?
Oh, I've been to 2 shows, homie. Yeah, I've been to Colorado and I've been to Chicago the first time. Man, you talk about experiences that will blow your freaking mind. Like, me and Ian are gonna go in Minnesota in September again. I'm kind of making it a little bit of a requirement, not like a hard requirement, but it's like a leader in the community. I really want them to see Heilung because that is very much the blueprint for what gave me the rituals and the gatherings. Is I went to that first show in January of 2020. And I'm like, this is what the world needs. And then 3 months later had the first gathering. So Heilung is definitely the biggest influence for me as far as like the gatherings and stuff.
Wow, no way, you don't say. Because I've seen some clips online. I'm like, this is a full-on fucking Cirque du Soleil Disney experience. Like, it's intense. Yeah, so that really gave you that much inspiration. Wow, I had no idea.
Oh, you need to go. Like, can you get to Minnesota? Yeah, dude, come to Minnesota. It's like $50.
St. Paul, right? Is that where we're at? St. Paul, Minnesota. Yeah, that's where it's at. So
let's
like
do it.
Bushcraft outside of St. Paul.
For sure. Just show up completely naked, covered in mud at the show.
I mean, honestly, they would allow it probably. Like,
probably.
I mean, half the people on stage are like half naked anyways. So
yeah. Well, the question is, do you go to the show jacked on mushrooms or jacked on brews?
Not the brews thing. I don't think you're going to be able to feel it as much because, like, in the show in California, you know, Red Rocks is an amazing venue outside under the stars, big giant rocks. It's dope. But at one point, I looked over because Caleb, the other show co-host that recently had a kid, which is why he's not on the show. He was right next to me at the show, and he's really into like Odin and the warrior energy and stuff like that. And we were on Alfadr High Tier, so like the song about Odin. And I looked at him, and well, first off, I was like, "Dude, take off your shoes." And he's like, "What?" I was like, "Dude, take off your shoes." So we take off our shoes, and he's like, "Whoa," because you can feel the vibration in the floor, which is really cool. And then as soon as it gets to that song, they get to the point, which Ian and I recently found out. In that song, there's a line that's Allfather High Tier, which is basically the title, and it means, and we call him Allfather. And then it does the drop, and it just starts listing all the names. And that's what we got to that point, and I looked at Caleb right before it happened. I'm like, "You're not fucking ready." And he's like, "What?" And then it drops, and he just lets out this blood curdling, like, "Oh," at the top of his lungs.
That's awesome. I know the part that you mean. That's where like they've got like the hugging and munning, like the raven calls, like, caw, 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 and then it breaks down. Oh man, that would be insane. That would be.
Oh yeah. One of my favorite stories is the first time I went to go see him. There was a guy next to me, totally like a headbanger, long hair. He's been to metal shows kind of guy. And as soon as it got to that song, I saw him. He was just vibing. And as soon as it dropped, he was just like, it was like he was gone the rest of the show, just head down. I swear I saw drool just flying. Like he was gone, man.
That is a weird reaction, but I guess it was a good one. Yeah, those guys are fucking amazing, man.
Yeah, and that's definitely like, that's not even Viking Age. That's really more of like the Germanic, pagan, Rome era kind of stuff, for sure.
Yeah, the hardcore stuff. Well, I've even heard Einar Selvig say that his inspiration is not really the Viking era, but like the Vokurvanderung, like the Germanic, the Goths, Franks, that whole period. More so. Have you guys heard that? Have you heard him talk about
I've
that?
heard it more about like he's more about the like Bronze Age than the Iron Age or something like that.
Oh yeah. Some of the instruments that they use are actually like Bronze Age horns and stuff like that. The really long ones that they have. I think those are actually Celtic in nature, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, like the ones that are like wrapped around them and shit like that?
Yeah, I believe those are Celtic in nature, where they come from, around that era.
That is so freaking cool.
So no, like James, I am a doctor at this moment, and I'm prescribing you. And this will help with your shirt taking off syndrome you were talking about. Go to a high lung show; it's going to cure you right up. Well, not really.
Hey, for sure. But I mean, are they serving beer? Are they serving beer and alcohol in that show, or is everyone stone cold like sober?
No, every show I've been to, they serve alcohol.
Got it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people tripping balls. And the one show was in Colorado, so there's people smoking a joint right next to me during the show.
Got it. And are there a lot of pagan babes there? High pagan babes, or is it like very high male?
Oh, there's so many pagan babes, James. Dude, it's like that was the first time I went to that. It was actually Wardruna was the first time I went to Red Rocks and saw Wardruna there. And I looked around, I'm like, dude, there's like a lot of chicks here.
Right on.
Well, yeah, you're in now.
Right on. That's amazing. It's hard to find because like in this community, if you like finding people who are similarly minded, right, it narrows down the populace in terms of finding people who are like-minded, right? I guess like what I said before, there are a lot of girls out there now who are, even in big cities, who are into witchy stuff, like new age stuff. So I think, the acceptability of being a pagan yourself is not that hard to find a match with. But yeah, that's cool. How much activity is going on up in Canada, you guys, with your network? Do you know how many followers you have in Canada? Like for both of you on your Instagrams and stuff?
No, definitely not like the Instagrams and stuff.
No.
We did a census not too long ago of just like our Discord, which doesn't really account for everyone, but I think there's like 20 or something like that in Canada floating around.
That sounds about right.
But with the website and how we're doing things now, honestly, I think we could do a gathering of probably 20 or 30 there pretty easily. Just it's so big up there, as you know. So getting the right half of Canada to do it in would be the challenge.
Got it. And I have another question about. I see you're going to be doing an event over in Holland. Is that correct? Coming up?
The Netherlands, yeah.
The Netherlands, got it. So how is this viewed in like Scandinavia and other Germanic countries? How is the faith viewed? Because there's more of a direct connection there with the vast majority of people's ancestors were practicing this religion, as opposed to in North America where it's more of a mishmash. Like, how is it viewed? Like, is it, do you know what I mean? Is it in a neutral light, in a negative light, in a positive light?
So it's bizarre. So I actually did kind of investigate this while I was there. So here in the States, paganism, again, has been very, it never really existed here, at least not in the Western European mindset, because everyone came here escaping various forms of Christianity. So there's just so much Christianity laid in the foundation of North America. So we've had a more of an explosive moment in the last 50, 60 years of paganism spreading. Whereas in Europe, it never truly went away. It just went underground. And I would argue that's just how it's been for the last 1,000 years. And so a lot of the groups that exist there have been doing it for hundreds of years, and they've just been doing it under the radar. And so they're not interested in growing. They're not interested in spreading. They don't mean anyone any harm, but they have their kind of local group that they've had for generations, and that's what they stick to. In particular, like Claire, our leader in the Netherlands, who's helping put this on, she's been to spiritual retreats before. You know, she's like, oh yeah, I go to shamanic retreats all the time. We do drum trances and silent retreats. So I think spirituality there, because Christianity is dying in Europe, like it's been dying for decades now. And I think it's just created a vacuum where spirituality in general has just become very popular. I just don't think it's been as Americanized in the sense of it's just, you know, very.
It's not as loud.
Yeah, it's not as loud about it.
It's not as loud. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Because I feel like there's a lot of young people out there that if they knew about these experiences, even like going to a High Lung concert or coming to one of the gatherings that you folks put on, with or without these kind of shamanic, you know, magic mushrooms or any of these other kind of substances, I feel like a lot of people would really get into that because there's this giant need for and search for meaning and community out there right now. You know,
well,
what I
and
mean?
I think, you know, one of the reasons, you know, my channel has, you know, done so well in the last 3 years almost is because I started it right before COVID. You know, I started 6 or 7 months before COVID. And then the moment, you know, everyone got shut in their houses, people started consuming more content, but that's also when they started looking for more answers. You know, I think after the first month, you know, we all had our takeout and, you know, movie binge-ness out of us. And we're like, okay, what now? And I think that's when a lot of people really started looking for answers. And a lot of people came to paganism through that.
For sure. For sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Now, so James, pulling it back to you a little bit here in the last quarter of this, where do you see like the Thors Outdoors thing going? You know, you have 2 episodes in. I'm assuming, do you have a third one already done and in the pipeline?
I was going to film that, but unfortunately I got COVID last week, so I was completely out of it.
Oh, speaking of which.
Yeah. Thank you, the COVID gods, and yeah, I'm gonna be doing a 3rd episode and just continuing. I mean, every weekend essentially that's my philosophy, right? Is to spend 2 days out there and just share it. So I found that it's been having a very good reaction on my Chinese social media. I've got about 350,000 followers over in China on the main social media platform over there. And they're in China just starting to open up their first national park. So camping and outdoor stuff is starting to really grow there. Patagonia only got into China, I think about 12 months ago or 16 months ago. So that's how sort of young the outdoors market is in China. But continue to do it. I mean, it's a very big niche on YouTube. There's a big audience out there. So I view it as, you know, I'm doing it for fun, but I'm also viewing it as, hey, I think I can get a lot of eyeballs on this and take a very unique, I think, approach to it. I don't know if it's always going to be called Thors Outdoors. That's the name for now. I like it, but it's always definitely going to have that sort of pagan, I think, infusion in it. And I think it's a very interesting and unique take on the whole outdoors and, you know, bushcraft and camping area. And, you know, it's funny that most people are atheists in this, the creators in this area, but the things that they say in their videos, right? There's always parts in the videos where they're reflecting on what it's like being in the wilderness, their thoughts of the wilderness, the thought of being a human in the wilderness. I'm like, these people are fucking religious and they just don't know it.
Right.
Everything they're saying is religious, but they're claiming that they're an atheist. So I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Whatever you want to say, bro. Like...
Whatever you want to say, bro. Whatever you want to say. But I mean, the nice thing about paganism is it provides some structure to it. It allows you to connect on a much deeper level, I think, to your surroundings. And it gives a sense of history to it. And also it connects you to your ancestors who were doing this for fucking ever.
Yeah, and they didn't have a choice, really.
Yeah,
they didn't really have.
We have the choice of going outdoors and living off the land. Oh, how horrible for us!
Absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, and also, you know, as a pagan, it's like this is your fucking church, man. This is your church, is out there in the sacred groves, and it's a place to practice and deepen your faith. You know, for sure. So, a long-winded answer is yes. I'm going to continue to do it, and share it, you know, whether it takes off in the West or not. You know, my Chinese audience definitely really likes it. I'm getting a lot of views over there. So, you know, continue to share it because again, I think it is a unique take on a very, you know, established niche and demand for content out there.
Yeah, I mean, really, I'm actually very curious because we talked about a little bit beforehand that you said like the Marvel, you know, Marvel's Thor and stuff like that was popular over in China. So when you started posting Norse pagan stuff on your channels and your pages and whatnot, what kind of response did you get from the people in China?
Well, I don't, to be honest. I mean, I don't really post any of that pagans. I don't put, like, for example, on all my posts, you know, on Instagram, I usually say praise Odin. I usually tag like, you know, pagan and Norse and all that kind of stuff. But I don't really do that in China because, first of all, I don't really do it because I don't think there's any really conceptualization of people practicing it today. So I haven't really delved into that. I really haven't delved into that.
Just start poking the bear a little bit, see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you should because I mean, it's very interesting. In China, Christianity is exploding.
Really?
I think there's more than 100 million Christians in China now because the Communist Party in China does not like religion. It's their enemy, right? So for the longest decades and decades and decades, there has been no religion in China. But again, much like I think in the West, there is this great thirst and desire for spiritual connection and spirituality in China. And the most well-formed thing, you know, version of that right now is Christianity. So it's really interesting in China. There's a definite, you know, desire for that. The thing there are pagan religions in China, but they're their own local ones, right? They've got their own deities. They've got their own long histories. So I don't know how well, like, I don't know if you could get a lot of Germanic pagan or Celtic pagan practitioners in China, maybe because again they do know about it because of the Marvel films.
Let's battle plan right here because you know you said let's talk about China Hoff. Okay.
Well, the Pope is like, thank God for China because it's one of the one places in the world where Christian numbers are exploding for that. That's right. Wild. So
is it like underground though because the government doesn't like it?
A lot of it's underground, like a lot of it's underground.
That's some like Roman shit right there.
It's some serious Roman shit. So like pastors being arrested, churches being bulldozed. It's fucking serious, man.
So maybe we shouldn't battle plan. I don't want you to get in trouble.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm not physically in China, right? So it's all good.
Well, because what I was thinking is, you know, because paganism in a sense is kind of you can live it undefined. Like you said, there's people near you that do the bushcrafting thing. They say they're not religious, but clearly they're very spiritually connected to nature. And so maybe a way for, you know, you to continue to grow that audience in China and really, you know, give them something enriching is showing that spiritual side to nature that doesn't have to have a name, that doesn't get official. That's just like, hey, when you breathe in this clean air and it fills your lungs, you know, you could just slide in there. That's the breath of Odin. You know, Odin gave bark breath. And that's why it's so important to us. That's all you gotta say. You know,
for sure, man.
Sneak away.
for sure. Well, my upcoming videos, I'm planning on doing like blots, you know, in the actual video. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and you don't even need to necessarily explain too much about that. Like people maybe, you know, get into it and research it further. Who knows? Maybe they do want, you know, follow-up videos like what are you doing there? You know, that kind of stuff. But I think, you know, pagan prayers, celebrations, blots, whatever you want to do or call them, when you're doing them in those environments, I think it just makes fucking sense to people.
Yeah,
it makes sense to people.
Well, if you did one where you like hunt or something like that, you know, maybe if you did actually get a kill or something like that, you give part of it back, like, you know, and that in itself, because I think that's, you know, we give offerings now by pouring out alcohol that we bought from a store, but it means so much more when it's like, hey, this is my meal tonight and I'm going to give back some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm planning on doing that with a turkey hunt this spring.
Oh, careful with those turkey hunts. That's my spirit animal, dog.
Well, you better give back. well, that's, I mean, that's the thing. I know you're joking, but I mean, people make this assumption that, listen, if you're hunting and eating something, how could you possibly love it? You know, but it's like, does the lion not love the gazelle, right? I mean, the lion eats the gazelle and kills the gazelle, but it doesn't mean that the lion doesn't love the gazelle, or in a way that a lion can love a gazelle, right? So it's a symbiotic, I think, way of being. I mean, life eats life, right? And if you are being thankful for it and showing that thankfulness, I think it's all part of the cycle, right? If anything, it's like, if you do really love turkeys, it's like harvesting a turkey, eating a turkey, seeing the turkey up, learning all the turkey's habits to be able to harvest one, et cetera, et cetera. I'd say arguably that's one of that's the way of showing your highest respect for a turkey in a sense.
I mean, recently I did a ritual at the Wisconsin gathering. It was private. It's not even going to be on video. But I made a new ritual headdress for when I do shamanic rituals, and it involves buffalo leather, turkey feathers, and there's deer jaws on it. as well.
Amazing.
And so part of that ritual was actually giving thanks to those animals that had to give up their lives in order to make that headdress, and so that it was made sacred. I still want it made out of buffalo leather, turkey feathers, and deer jaw, but something had to die for that, or at least lived a life. And so it was giving an offering and showing that respect for it. So you don't necessarily have to, we're never going to live in an era where we don't kill animals anymore. That's just not going to happen. Even though some people want that, but we can honor and respect them a lot more than we're given now, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I think showing people a way to do that and showing them another way, another side, I guess, of hunting and fishing, where people still are now incorporating the practices that our ancestors normally did, right? Because on a mainstream show like Meat Eater, for example, if guys after harvesting, say, a rainbow trout, suddenly had like a little, carving of a rainbow trout that they put on a branch and then like said a prayer or did a little ceremony to the rainbow trout god, right? People would think like they just wouldn't do that on one of those shows. But all throughout human history, our ancestors absolutely would have done that, right? Absolutely. So I don't think it's strange at all to kind of bring those kind of things back that we would have historically been doing. Unfortunately, in this space, it's not common practice. I think, hunting, at least in the United States, the numbers are that 75% of the American populace supports hunting for food gathering purposes. So it's actually has a very high, approval rating as is. But if you had more hunters and fishermen out there doing these kind of little practices, celebrations, prayers, offerings, etc., I think that the support would go up even more.
Oh yeah. Well, a great example of this is at our gathering in Wisconsin. The owner was incredibly Christian. Like, I mean, pamphlets on the table, take a pamphlet, kind of Christian. Texan Blade, the guy that rented the property, about God, and he's like, how do you view God? It's like, dude, we're paying you money to give us your house, like, shut up. But we were kind of worried because he was actually on the property, like in his little shack, watching our rituals. He had a window, it was clearly the light was on and he was in there, and it had a clear view to Ian covered in black paint calling to hell. And I was just like, dude, this guy is like watching. After every ritual he would drive away. And then we were sitting here like, oh, dude, this is going to get weird. But then, like, the second day, we had people in the woods, and it's so natural in our community to clean up trash. Like, if we see trash, we have to clean it up. That's kind of built into our process. Ian and I went out, cleaned up some trash. Other people were out there cleaning up trash. And he saw us cleaning up trash. And he stopped, and he's like, no one's ever done that before. No one's actually respected my property. And he gave us 5 stars, said, you guys can come back whenever you want,
Wow.
And I think that kind of stuff speaks louder than anything else in this world.
Yeah.
For sure. There's that pagan connection to nature, man, cleaning it up. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's another thing I'd really suggest to pagans out there, is that if you've never harvested a wild critter like a fish, or whether it's a rabbit or a turkey or a deer, really think about learning about that and doing that, because it connects you to your local landscape like nothing else. I would say that sleeping outside overnight is a standard deviation above just taking a hike. And then actually harvesting wild food is another standard deviation above camping overnight outside, because then you actually visually see, you become a part of that landscape. You become heavily invested in it because you realize this is where my food comes from. So if you see someone littering, if you see someone's going to put an oil pipeline through your backyard, right? If you see someone's going to environmentally destroy it in some way, you're invested on a completely other level into your local landscape. And I think that pagans really need to experience that, because it's the ultimate form, I think, of connection to nature, is to actually harvest wild food and to consume it while you're out there. It makes you love it on a whole different level. Level.
Yeah, well, it's like when Jacob and I were walking around on that property in Wisconsin, like we had come across some of the deer trails and stuff like that, and it was, I mean, we had talked about it as like later on, that as we were walking, it's like you would see this trail, and then all of a sudden, just like that, you could see where it went off into the woods, like a clear path. And it was, whether it was like just an instinctive, this is what humans have done for thousands of years, like kicking back in, you could see that path clear as day on exactly where these deer went through and stuff like that, and had that like deeper connection. Obviously, we didn't hunt anything on that land because it wasn't our own, but it was close enough to getting to that aspect of like, this feels so much more natural, and that deeper connection to that land in particular. Because once we spotted like the beginning of a trail, you could just like look, and you could just see where it was winding off into the distance through the trees and stuff. And you're like, oh, that's exactly where they went. And we found like tufts of hair and stuff like that.
Absolutely. It's magical, man.
Yeah.
They
So
are
much poop.
literally
Oh, yeah.
a lot of poop. A lot of poop. But they are the forest spirits, man. They are the are they not the forest spirits manifesting themselves in this magical form? You know, I came across a giant steaming pile of moose shit with my stepbrother when we were camping last winter.
Hot.
And hot, yeah. And moose shit, you know the little pebbles from deer. Moose shit are like, they're like big marbles, right? They're a lot bigger. But anyways, I mean, a moose is like a 2,000-pound forest giant. And the thought that critter was somewhere like 5 minutes away walking through the forest, it's just like, whoa. It's magic. It's pure magic. That's the only way I can describe it. If those critters weren't there, it'd just be so different, man. It would be so
when we were in
different.
Colorado for the Highland show, we went up like really deep into one of the state parks there to like a mountain, like right below a mountain glacier, just because we were like, we got to see something like this. Sure enough, the moment we pulled up, this guy was walking up past the parking lot. And he's like, guys, there's 2 moose right over there. And we're like, what? And sure enough, there was this two of these huge moose just like in this little field nesting, and we had some apples. And like we would take a bite and we would roll it over to them, and we were like leaving offerings for these moose because we're like, oh, the gods, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, to be honest, you can't not believe in some kind of god when you see a creature like that. When you come across them in the wilderness, like again, it's only religious language that can describe the experience. And for people who are cynical, out of touch, militant atheists, etc., when you see something like that, it really breaks through, I think, the barriers, man. It's incredible. And again, it's something that makes people care, I think, can get people invested in nature, is seeing these critters, but also the ultimate thing, I think, harvesting them. Many people don't realize how well wildlife populations are managed in North America. There's the whole North American wildlife management method. And harvests, like tags for harvesting animals, are in very defined areas and seasons. And the number of tags issued are directly in correlation with what the sustainable harvest is, because wildlife biologists in every state and province, right, are measuring the wildlife population. Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they steady? And then issuing an appropriate number of tags. So you don't have to worry. If there's a tag available, this is a sustainable harvest. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, if I shoot this deer, is it gonna, oh my God, white-tailed deer are like fucking everywhere. There's more it's estimated there's more white-tailed deer in North America right now than at the time of European contact back in the day. So pagans shouldn't be worried about like, if I harvest a deer, will they disappear? You know what I mean? They're fucking everywhere.
But
there's
they're
so
cute,
many of them.
James.
They taste good too.
The little tail, you see it flopping in the wind, and you're like, damn. I'm over here. I got a family of deer I kind of watch after nearby, like in the parks that's near my house. There's actually a whole family of them, and every time I go there, like last time I was following them, and they ended up taking me to some trash, and I clean up the trash for them. Every time I go back there now, they like follow me around.
Oh, right on, man. Right on. That's great.
So I can't kill those deer.
Well,
I'll have to go somewhere else to kill the other ones.
Well, the thing is that white-tailed deer populations are so high in so many areas that literally deer are dying because of overpopulation reasons, like because of disease and because of starvation. So in a lot of scenarios, harvesting a deer or two from your local landscape is actually helping improving the health of the remaining deer on the landscape. So it's interesting, man. It's interesting. I mean, the other thing is like, we're so used to just buying critters and meat in the supermarket, you forget that someone is killing that animal.
Oh, how many kids out there do you think don't actually connect meat in the supermarket to animal in real life?
Probably a lot.
Yeah,
a scary number.
The cheeseburger they're eating at McDonald's, you know, how many animals did it take to make that damn thing? And they just don't even think about it, or never even thought about it.
For sure, absolutely. And you know, if you're not into doing mammals right away, start with birds, start with a rabbit, or start with fish. Fish are a very easy thing to start with. Even harvesting.
It's so much easier to kill a fish, guys. It's so much easier. You see that dumb, ugly little face, you're like, there ain't no life in there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, every time I dispatch a fish, I still have a twang. Like, there's this twang of thankfulness, sadness, gratitude. It's a big mixture of emotions, right? But generally the most ethical thing to do is to take a small bat, you know, an axe, something, and you bonk them on the head right behind the eyes, and they're dead immediately. as opposed to them asphyxiating, right? Just throwing them into a bucket and then slowly asphyxiating. Yeah. So even when you do that, there are these twangs, but it connects, again, it's connecting you with the local landscape, and it's the reality of death. It's like, if you're not doing it, somebody else is.
Right.
You're paying somebody else to do it, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's powerful, man.
So the last funny thing I want to talk about here, we're actually very over an hour mark here, so we need to get closing up. But you know, your love for the environment and our natural world definitely bit you in the ass here recently with that small electric car in the snow, didn't it?
Yeah. Pagans, be careful with those electric cars. Well, I mean, to be honest, it's really a function of I would say having a two-wheel drive car versus a four-wheel drive car. You know, if you're doing off-road kind of stuff like I am, I've gotten this freaking car stuck, I think 4 times, twice in the mud, twice in the snow, doing backcountry stuff. One time I was turkey hunting, I got it stuck, and the tow truck driver came down the backcountry road, and I literally stepped out of the woods, full head to toe camo with a shotgun. The guy nearly shot his pants. Yeah, I mean, it's a great car. To me, I've been driving this Chevrolet Bolt now for 5 years, and aside from getting it caught, 4 times in the backcountry, it's been a great little car.
I'm just picturing you pulling up to these like little Canadian backcountry roads, and there's like a bunch of guys with like deer in the trunk, and you pull up on your little Chevy, and you're like, "What's up, boys?"
Oh yeah, dude, I get some fucking looks, man. I get some looks. Let me tell you that. Or when I pull up into like a gas station to get some water or something, and I'm in, again, head to toe camo and like hunting boots, and I step out of this electric car. I'm pretty sure I might be the only electric car owner with like a shotgun currently in his back seat in the whole continent. So yeah, but I mean, it's the thing where, yeah, most of my friends who do the kind of things I like, they drive pickup trucks, but it's like, you love nature so much, it's like you want to protect it too. You know what I mean? And EVs don't make sense for everybody, especially people who live in rural areas, especially people who live in the north, like, Ian in Minnesota. The range decreases by basically 40% in the middle of winter. So it's not for, they're also, a lot of EVs are very expensive, right? It's not for everybody right now, but pagans, consider it.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Iowa? Let me tell you about Iowa, James. I've recently been to Iowa, and it's about 120 miles to nothing to get to the next nothing.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, well, Jake, with the amount of driving that you do to all the different gatherings and whatnot, I can almost certainly say that an EV is probably not the correct car for you right now, because the ranges just aren't there, and the amount of time it takes to recharge. When you got to all of a sudden drive to Minnesota to go to a Highland concert with Ian and I mean, you can't just do that.
I'm booking you down. I'm writing this shit down if you keep talking about it.
Got it. Let's do it. Let's fucking do it.
Well, with that, I do want to go ahead and end us here because, this is gone well over an hour. But James, let's give it back to you one more time. Where can people find you? Where do you want them to find you? And last minute things for everybody.
For sure. Just James Alofs on Instagram and Thors Outdoors on YouTube. Those are the 2 best places to find me. And I love connecting with pagan folk. I just followed Ian. I can't believe I wasn't following you earlier on Instagram. But
you texted me like a schoolgirl, like, "Oh my God, he followed me."
But I love connecting with you guys and talking about this stuff. So yeah, thanks for all the great work that you guys do, getting all the great gospel out there, if that's the correct word. And
I threw up a little bit in my mouth, but I appreciate the sense.
Yeah, love that pagan community, baby. It's such a big part of my life, so it's awesome.
Yeah, well, we'll get you to a gathering before too long. Yeah. We'll try to get one up there in Canada for you. I think Texas will get upset if we don't have one down there first, but we'll get you. We'll get you in the queue.
Right on.
But thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. If you enjoyed us here in the video format, again, this is not something we're going to do for every episode, just because it's a lot of work. But I figured with this one, having James on here, we can show some of his footage from his YouTube channel, and you can see his axe and his other tools he's just been playing with variously throughout this episode.
Oh, you saw that?
Oh yeah. I saw you playing with that hacksaw thing. Yeah, I forget what you were talking about. You're like, yeah, China, yeah, they're not really big on religion, It's like, yeah. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so very much for joining us. And oh man, at the time of this episode coming out, the fundraiser's out because this comes out next week. Holy shit! So if you listen to the Folk Podcast, the fundraiser for the Hallland is out right now. So we don't actually know how well it's doing at this point, but if you go to our community website, I'll leave a link down here below. Please check out that fundraiser for the Hallland. We don't know how long it's going to take. Could take weeks, could take months, could take years, but we're prepared for the long haul. So any help you're able to provide would be really amazing. So thank you all so much for joining us for the podcast, and any help you can provide for the Hallland, but definitely check out Thors Outdoors with James Alofs. And thank you all very much. So until the hall, Skull.
Skull.
Skull.